Looks like we're live. Roll call, please.
Senator Boner.
Here.
Senator Case.
He's here. He must have stepped out.
Okay. Senator Nethercott.
What do you want to say?
Here. Senator Scott
Here.
and Chairman Driscoll.
Here. Welcome everyone to Senate Corporations. Bills taken up today will be Senate File 15, Temporary Licensing Permitting Authority 2, Senate File 17, Governmental Publication Requirements, Senate File 28, Motor Vehicle Security and Interest Perfection. For the public, these bills will all, this is our Senate Corporations meeting. They'll all be discussed today, and these bills will go on to general file when we go back into live session on March 1st. So testimony actually to bring them through. With that, I'll call on Senator Scott to walk us through Senate File 15, Temporary Licensing and Permitting Authority 2. Senator Scott, you have the floor.
Mr. Chairman, let me try to get all the way unmuted here. Mr. Chairman, Senate File 15 came to us because we had reports back in the May and June timeframe of licensing committees that were having difficulties due to the COVID virus. The specific one I remember is the physical therapists had new people coming into the state that were hired but couldn't get licensed because COVID had disrupted their process. I think made their licensure exam temporarily unavailable. A number of other committees, licensing boards had this difficulty as well. How well they could handle it depended on the specifics of their licensure statute. And frankly, Mr. Chairman, how much nerve the licensing board had in cutting legal corners that were necessary to comply. So what this bill was originally drafted for Committee 10, but the meeting times were such that in preparation for a potential second legislative special session, this permanent version of the bill was shifted over to Corporations Committee. And let me explain what the bill does. It applies to all the professions licensed under Title 33, plus 3 others that appear to be relevant. There is at least one, I think, that is not included because their setup was such they didn't look like they would ever have problems. You can see the list on page 2. Of the things that can go wrong here. The examinations not being given, if you don't have the continuing education opportunities available, or some these statutory requirements could not be met due to a public health order or weather conditions, this being Wyoming, they can, paragraph C gives the licensing certifying authority the ability to impose reasonable necessary restriction requirements on a license or certification when they give the waiver pursuant to subsection B. And Mr. Chairman, our thought was maybe if somebody hadn't been able to take the licensure exam, for instance, they might want to say you can practice, but temporarily under the supervision of some other licensed professional. Essentially, that paragraph's designed under these circumstances to give the licensing board the authority to be sensible. And then D is a provision. One of the things that can happen, Mr. Chairman, is the exam that's been used and has been specified in the statute ceases to be available and the profession goes to a different exam. That's been a problem in the past, and it could be a problem again. That might be a reason you'd have to grant some waiver from a statutory requirement. Subsection D provides that if 2 years have gone by and the thing you gave a temporary waiver for is still going on, then the licensing board should approach the relevant legislative committee to get their statute changed, because obviously something permanent has changed. And the standard it sets forth is if they're health related, they approach the labor committee. Anything else approaches this committee. And that seems to be a workable thing. Mr. Chairman, this bill just gives your licensing boards the ability to use common sense to deal with an emergency, either like a COVID or some man-made emergency, like the licensing exam suddenly is not available, that kind of thing. Mr. Chairman, with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Oh, you're muted,
You're
Mr.
muted, Mr.
Chairman.
Chairman.
Okay, any questions for Senator Scott? Thank you. Okay, I think we'll go next. If we know anybody, Amanda, that's in the waiting room that is industry or connected professionally. If you know, if not, we'll just start down the list on public comments.
Mr. Chairman, I'm letting them in.
Thank you. Okay, I see Joanne Reed. Let's go ahead and let Ms. Reed in or have her turn on. And please identify yourself and whatever role. I'm sorry, I don't know you, Ms. Reed. Welcome to Senate Corporations.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Joanne Reed. I am the office manager and an executive director for the A&I professional licensing boards. And I am also the executive director of the Board of Physical Therapy. So I am aware of the situation that brought this forward, and I'm happy to answer any questions the committee might have for me.
Questions for Ms. Reed, committee? See none. Thank you very much. Appreciate.
Thank you.
Further public testimony?
Mr. Chairman, I don't see any other hands raised.
Okay, with that, Senator Scott.
Mr. Chairman, I move we report Senate File 15 back to the Senate with the recommendation that it do pass.
Thank you.
Good morning.
We're not
Hey.
recommending.
Just saying
Don't
good
need
morning. Good morning, Senators.
Senator's case.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. Somebody from the governor's office is here. I've got to step aside. I'll be back.
Wow. Okay. Well, we'll be one vote short then. Any discussion on the bill? Question being called. Roll call, please.
Senator Boner,
Aye.
Senator Case,
I'll leave the vote open, Senator, in case we know I'll be right back.
Senator Nethercott,
Aye.
Senator Scott,
Aye.
Chairman Driscoll.
Aye. We'll leave the vote open. Senator Case can finalize the vote, but the bill has passed. Senate File 15 has passed Senate Corporation. Senator Case, would you like to vote? I held it open for you, by the way.
I don't think you heard you.
Senator Case,
Are we voting?
We're voting. I held the vote open for you. I'm being a good guy.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I was 5 feet away. Aye.
Okay. That makes it unanimous, Senator Case. Senate File 15 is passed out. Our next bill will be, gotta get back to my list here. Senate File 17, governmental publication requirements. I can assure you we'll have more than one public comment on this one. Senator Scott, would you like to present the bill, please?
Mr. Chairman, and I am having some trouble with my computer, so if I cut out suddenly, bear with me. Mr. Chairman, what happened here was last year when it became apparent that we were going to have to make major budget cuts and cut back expenditures, and our revenues all across state and local government were going to go down. The then chairman of Corporations Committee reached out to the cities and counties and said, what can we do that would get rid of unnecessary requirements on you that would reduce your workload and your expenses? And this is what they came back with, was a further attempt to reduce the government publication requirements. So that's the origin of the bill. This committee did reach out to them, and you would be better off, I think, having the cities or the counties tell you the specifics, but the idea is basically to reduce their costs of publishing things in the newspapers and to take those things to their official websites. That's the primary thing. I think it may also reach some of the school districts, Mr. Chairman. So that was the origin of the bill. That's what it does. The savings are not overwhelming, but every little bit helps in this thing. My bill does not have a meaningful fiscal note, so I can't tell you how much the savings are.
Thank you, Senator Scott. I noticed there's no fiscal note on it that mattered. Questions of Senator Scott? Senator Nethercott, are you raising your hand?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My computer is, of course, installing updates, so that's helpful. But I believe we recall hearing from testimony concerning the fiscal update from some of the municipalities across the state. And of course, it varied based on the size of those municipalities. But some of the smaller municipalities, those publishing costs comprised sometimes up to 1% to 10% of their budgets, depending on the size of the municipality, of course, and the size of that budget. But when you're talking about those costs and when we're asking them to reduce, that's a pretty significant piece of their budget that they communicated a need to have that flexibility. And again, it's not mandatory, so those municipalities and government entities can still publish in the newspaper. It's just that requirement is gone. They can still do it if they want to.
Further comments or questions on the committee? Okay, we'll go back out. Amanda will start letting people in. I actually see people on the list I know at this point, so we can let them in one at a time. Mr. Palm. He is muted. Mr. Palm, if you can see us, if you want to go ahead and unmute and turn on your video.
Sorry about that.
Welcome.
Can you hear me all right?
We can hear you great. Welcome to Senate Corporations.
Excellent. My name's Rory Palm. I'm the publisher of the Wyoming Tribune, Eagle and Cheyenne, and current president of the Wyoming Press Association. Publishers across this state are very passionate about the news and information they provide to their readers. including critical information included in the public notices. Senate File 17 proposes to move public notices out of newspapers and placed instead on local government websites. And I have a few concerns that I'd like to share. Most city websites across this state are currently inadequate to take on this task, and many would need major upgrades at potentially huge cost to taxpayers. In addition, Wyoming cities and towns aren't prepared to accurately process and post public notices to their websites. Many, if not most, do not have personnel that can be dedicated to these processes, nor do they have the capacity to ensure the accuracy and security of public notices on their websites. Once a public notice is printed in a newspaper, it's of public record and can't be changed. It's in print. If public notices are placed only on government websites, and if left in a potentially unsecure environment, data could be changed, and it could become a legal nightmare for our local municipalities. Wyoming newspapers are extremely cost-effective and efficient at distributing public notices and informing the public through their print and digital products. Also, if this bill is passed, the important government information and public notices will be less accessible to the people of this state. Numerous taxpayers across this state have limited or no access to the internet. Many of our older residents don't even have computers. The goal of our government should be to uphold transparency. We need to give people of this great state more access to government information, not less. Public notices need to stay in newspapers. It's more cost-effective, more efficient, more secure, and creates more accessibility for our residents. That's all I have. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Questions from Mr. Palm, committee? Seeing none. Thank you, Mr. Palm. Great testimony. Jeremiah Riemann. Mr. Riemann, would you like to testify?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Jeremiah Riemann here on behalf of the Wyoming County Commissioners Association. We do strongly support this bill. It has been important to me to have communication with our members and press to understand their issues and how we could better address them. And I certainly respect the issues of transparency, the financial impact that this could have, and third, real respect for what value our newspapers bring to our communities. Mr. Chairman, in terms of the WCCA's priorities in this specific area, our first one, of course, is transparency. We too believe that the public deserves to see this information, and I just want to talk about that very quickly. This bill has the statutory language that already shows counties are required to post this information online. This bill doesn't change that. It is already a requirement for Wyoming's counties, and we're carrying out that responsibility in earnest. Mr. Chairman, one of the things that we asked for and that was incorporated into this bill is a requirement that we actually provide the information to the newspaper, regardless of whether it has to be published. So we will be providing that. I understand that means that it's their decision about whether to actually print it, but we did ask, and that was included in the statutory language that's included in this bill. Mr. Chairman, in terms of transparency, counties, like other governmental bodies, are required to provide this information to the public at request, whether that's in hard copy or in electronic form. So I'm going to assure you, members of the committee, that we will not be shirking our responsibilities in the transparency arena, and we'll be following through on those responsibilities. Mr. Chairman, another portion of this bill that's important to us is fair treatment. And I'm specifically pointing to page 5, lines 9 through 19. This is the provision that requires counties to publish salary and other data, both in the newspaper and online. Mr. Chairman, we're the only entities, along with our counterparts in the municipalities, that have this requirement. No other governmental body, whether it's education across the state departments, or special districts and other governmental bodies have that requirement. So we're simply asking for fair treatment. We're not saying we shouldn't be required to release it. We still will be required to release it. We're just asking that that we be provided some fair treatment when it comes to publishing in the newspaper. In other words, if you went into the grocery store, the county employee, the municipal employee, will have had their salary and information posted in the newspaper, whereas other governmental personnel had nothing posted in the newspaper. So again, it's about fair treatment. Mr. Chairman, part of the approach here, going to Senator Scott's introduction, is to reduce both the fiscal and the administrative impact. I'll share some data here in just a second, but we also heard from some of our counties that they're often required to provide the information to the newspapers in certain formats, and that can take staff time, considerable amount of staff time to produce. Now, in terms of the data, and Mr. Chairman, what we did is asked our members to give us data specific to the two provisions that are affected in this bill. The first one being the salary data. And what we heard is that on average, again, the numbers are not overwhelming, but on average, counties spent about $900 a year in publishing that salary data. It was anywhere from a low of $57 in Carbon County up to a maximum in Sweetwater County of just short of $2,900 to publish that information. Mr. Chairman, as it relates to the requirement to post meeting minutes, which is the other component of this bill for counties, it was an average of over $17,000, just short of $17,300 to publish that annually, with the low in Lincoln County of just short of $1,100 and a high in Campbell County of just short of $35,000 to publish that information. Mr. Chairman, I didn't receive data from every county, but I did try and do the calculations to find out what the average would be. And amongst all of that data, it comes to about $400,000 a year statewide that would be saved by counties just for these two provisions. And again, without loss of transparency. Mr. Chairman, I wanted to just end on a comment that we strongly value. Again, the newspapers in this state, we understand that beyond the costs that we bear as counties, the newspapers do provide a service, and they often do that at no cost to counties, announcing various events that are going on in the community. And we certainly respect and value that. We don't want to see any newspaper lost as a part of this. We don't think that will happen. And again, we do value them. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'd stand for any questions, but we ask that you would move this bill forward.
Any questions for Mr. Reeman? Senator Scott.
Mr. Chairman, with regard to one remark that he made, this salary publication requirement applies to school districts. If you look at page 6 and 7 of the bill, you can see that, and we're taking that online too. And I would comment that those figures have been very useful to me and the Education Committee as we're starting to look at what we're going to do about recalibration, and have noticed quite a discrepancy in the escalation of administrative salaries as opposed to teachers.
Thank you, Senator Scott.
Mr.
Senator Boner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the detailed information, Jeremiah, about the overall cost of counties in terms of dollar figures. I was wondering if you might be able to put that in the context of a percentage basis at 400,000. How much is that in terms of, big picture? Is that 1%? Is it 0.1% of the overall county's budgets? Some additional context would be helpful.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Boner, I don't have that immediately at my fingertips. Trying to look at this. if I'm looking at some of the smaller counties in relationship to their budget, you're probably looking at about 1 to 2% in those categories. If you looked at, say, Campbell County, $34,000 is going to be significantly less than 1% of their overall budget. I'd be happy to try and set some of these against their overall budget if that's helpful, but I think just as at quick glance, that is what it looks like. Mr. Chairman, if I could respond to Senator Scott. Mr. Chairman, the school districts, as I understand it, are required to post salary information. The difference being that they don't have to actually post the name of the individual next to their salary when they do those publications. So it is, in my perspective, a significant difference.
Senator Nethercott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just for point of discussion, I do think that the requirement for county commissioner, for county salaries is disparate when it comes to other government entities across the state for that requirement. But, ultimately the entire conversation is moot because all of that data is online through a variety of data miners who have taken our data and exploited it for profit, which is the irony associated with the newspaper industry. So, they obtained the data for free or, at de minimis cost associated with the public records request, forced it to come out and then provided that information and then data mined it or using it in other creative ways, I think. So, the entire conversation really is moot other than the name and salary information isn't being published in your local community newspaper, but it's all available online at any given time of every single government entity across the state, from state employees to county employees to college employees to university employees, names, addresses, salaries. So, what's your comment back to that?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Senator Nethercott, absolutely agree. And we're not here to suggest that data should not be public. Our major concern is the disparity that somebody could pick up the morning newspaper, see a county employee's information, but everybody else, you'd have to dig further and take extra steps or go to the county itself to request that data. And that, from our perspective, is a bit unfair.
Further questions for Mr. Riemann? Senator Nethercott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Riemann, I know that you were part of conversations, I think, with the Joint Judiciary Committee in the previous years, looking at some of the public records issues. And one solution that was come up with in previous years, really as it relates to some of those smaller special districts and other government entities that may not have a website reflecting the concerns of the newspaper industry, that there is, and there has been, the ability for them to provide that information through the Department of A&I's website. Are you aware of any of those government entities using that platform?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Nethercott, as it relates to the special districts, I don't know how they might be using those platforms. Certainly the counties, with some of the statutory changes that were made, we are providing that data to the state for distribution through the state A&I office. I will also say, in addition to that, Converse County itself has taken to an OpenGov platform and has done that at its own expense for a number of years. So in real time, you can go in and look at the checkbook there and various data sets. I think our preference would be to try and find a statewide system that would work for counties, for municipalities, the state, for special districts and on, where we could do something similar and not have it be a bunch of one-offs. In Converse County's case, it's about a $40,000 expense. And I think based on my understanding of how other states have approached this, the expenses per entity are significantly less when we bundle up, and we would love to participate in trying to find that sort of a solution for the future.
Ms. Reeman, further questions, Mr. Reeman? Senator Case.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. It's kind of following up on Senator Nethercott's question. I'll bet the county clerks would know a lot about the special districts and where their information is being posted and things like that, especially the little ones.
Thanks, Senator Case. I happen to know we have a whole bunch waiting in the wings. We'll probably get some pop up here. Further questions, Mr. Reeman? Thank you. Good to see you. Mr. Downing, I see you're waiting in the room. Are you ready?
Mr. Chairman, Jonathan Downing on behalf of the Wyoming Press Association. We'd sent a note earlier this morning that there are some other publishers that I think you might want to hear first from before we come in on the tail end with some additional comments specifically to the bill.
Very good. We'll defer then. And
Thank you.
we have Darcy Hoffland.
Muted.
Darcy's muted.
Mr. Chairman, Darcy and Jim Woods are with Mr. Downing.
Okay.
I don't see anyone else with their hand raised in the waiting room. Oh, I've got one right now. Okay.
Very good. Thank you. Jen Hicks.
Good morning.
Welcome, Ms. Hicks, Senate Corporations. I'll let you take off, tell us who you are and what you do. Welcome.
All right. Thank you, Senator. My name is Jen Hicks. I am the editor and owner of the Buffalo Bulletin in Johnson County. I'm also the vice president of the Wyoming Press Association. The Buffalo Bulletin has served the readers of Johnson County since 1884 and has been in our family for 3 generations. Public notices are really near and dear to my heart because I know from experience that they are the best and most efficient way to allow the public to see how government is transacting business. This morning, I just want to share a couple of anecdotes with you. In the past, I have talked with your colleague, Senator Dave Kinski, who represents Johnson County, on numerous occasions about public notices. When Senator Kinski was the mayor of Sheridan, he developed a practice of holding budget hearings the week after employee salaries were published in the Sheridan Press. And he had a very particular reason for doing that. He was absolutely sure that after the fine folks of Sheridan saw what their civil servants were being paid, the council chambers would be full of citizens coming to remind counselors that when they offered pay raises or bonuses, they were spending the people's money. And then Mayor Kinski's wisdom has proven numerous times in published studies that that's actually accurate. When the public knows how money is being spent, they are incredibly invested in making sure it's being spent well. As a follow-up to that, I would share an anecdote from the city of Bell, California. Now, most of us don't aspire to be like Californians, and this is really the best way I can show you that we would not want to be like California. Bell is an outer suburb of LA. It is rather lower income, and Bell has a population of about 38,000 people. So we're not talking about a tremendously large city. The people of Bell, California had wondered for a long time how the city manager and the chief of police were living in what could only be described as very extravagant homes, homes that were valued near $1 million in 2010. And it took an investigation by the LA Times to figure out why. Through completely legal, but perhaps unsavory ways of conducting business, the city councilors had arranged to pay themselves almost $100,000 a year for their jobs. The chief of police was making nearly $500,000. By comparison, the governor of California at that time was making about $400,000 a year. And the city manager for the city of Bell was making over $750,000 a year. Now, these pay raises have been approved in public meetings where votes were taken. But there is a significant limitation to the state of California's public meetings law, and that is that public meeting minutes do not have to be published anywhere. Now, the city of Bell had gone a little further, and they did post their agendas online, but the only place they published their meeting minutes was on a bulletin board in City Hall. It's really easy to see how, even if followed to the letter of the law, taking the requirement for the public to be able to see how the business is being conducted out of the public eye allows excesses to creep in. When you put the fox in charge of the hen house, it's easy to see how accountability and transparency is lost. I really feel that by publishing notices, meeting minutes, and salaries in Wyoming newspapers, local governing bodies do a justice to the people's time and resources by allowing people to see how and where those resources are going. Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Hicks. Questions for Ms. Hicks? Senator Nethercott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Hicks, what's the circulation of your newspaper?
We are received in 3,900 households.
What is the population of Johnson County?
Just under 9,000.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Further question, Ms. Hicks? Further question? I've got a couple, and that's Senator Nethercott asked one of the ones I had was kind of what we were reaching. Is there any rate structure, and actually you're part of the vice of the Press Association. Do we have any rate structure that's a set rate, or because most of these communities have one paper?
Yep.
You just charge whatever you want, obviously looking at the percentages, it's up and down.
No, absolutely not, Senator. What newspapers can charge for public notification publication is regulated by Wyoming statute. A newspaper can only charge the highest rate for which the public municipality would qualify. So at my newspaper, for example, in the Buffalo Bulletin, we have an open rate. That's the rate that anyone who walks off the street and says, I'm opening a new restaurant, I'm opening a new whatever, I'd like to put an ad in your paper. This is a person we don't have a relationship with, and this person would have 90 days to pay. At the Buffalo Bulletin, our rate for legal publications is 16% below our nonprofit rate. So our nonprofit rate is the lowest rate. It goes to places like the hospital when they have a giving campaign. It goes to things like the animal shelter is doing a fund drive. Those people get the nonprofit rate. The rate we charge for public notices is 16% below that. We could charge a rate up to 37% higher than our nonprofit rate by statute.
Perfect.
We don't.
Thank you, great answers. This is personal, you may not want to answer it. What percentage of your paper's income comes off of public notices and processing? I say this, I subscribe to about 5 or 6 papers, and I think they're lifebloods of our rural communities to some degree. It's what we have now. But what's the net effect, I guess? What percentage of your net is, and what's it going to do to you if it changes?
Sure, I appreciate the question, Senator. At the Buffalo Bulletin, legal notices, and I'm going to include everything here like sheriff sales, legal name changes have to be published in newspapers, of course, and settling of estates. Legal notices account for less than 5% of our net income.
Perfect, thank you.
Mhm.
Further questions for Ms. Hicks? Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
I see we have Ms. Freeze, who's an old friend to Corporations Committee. Would you like to come in, Ms. Freeze? Welcome, Senate
Good
Corporation.
morning. Good morning. How are you?
Good. Good to see you in a different role. Welcome.
Yeah, old friend to corporations, definitely. I served on the committee that when this changed over to having the names posted. So I served on the committee and Senator Case was the chairman of corporations at that time. Our committee was the Press Association, municipalities, commissioners, county clerks. I think that was it. And so when we set these up to allow, I mean, we worked on this for a long time, whether or not we were going to put names with salaries. And we agreed to do that. And the committee, the corporations committee kind of promised at that time that we would always look forward to other public entities, the state, the school districts. We talked a little bit about special districts, although it's a little bit harder for them to probably accomplish some of that because a lot of them don't have websites. So I just wanted to give a little bit of history there. And then in comments to all of us having websites, we have for some time now had a lot of requirements of us to put things on our websites. And I think we do a good job of that. And I think that we are totally capable of doing that. So I just wanted to respond as counties that we are doing that. We do in our county, I know across the state, and a number of county clerks have seen these recently. I probably have received in the last year 5 records requests for salaries and benefits. And the benefit part of it we don't have on the website, but we are able to send them to our website, and they have not come back and said they need something further from us. So I don't know how many other people are getting those requests. And on special districts, so in their budgets, they are required to send those to the county clerks, and then we pass those on to the commissioners and the assessor, mainly for setting of mill levies, and their salaries are not broken out in their budgets, but their form is done by the Department of Audit, and maybe it would be as simple as having them list out their salaries in that, and then they would not have to have a specific website for themselves to put their salaries separately on, because those are going on the county websites. So I was just going to give you that information. And also special districts who do not have an office that is open something like 30 hours or 20 hours a week, I can't remember that exact number, they have to send all of their agendas and their financials and their minutes to the county clerk. And I know in my county, we do that electronically, and I have an electronic file. And honestly, in all the years that has happened, I have yet to have anybody come ask for those files for those special districts. And that's just an aside. But those are just some things I was just going to comment on.
Questions for Ms. Freeze? Very good. Thank you for the testimony.
Thank you.
Mr. Boren, I hope I didn't butcher your name too bad. You've got your hand up.
You did very well. Thank you very
Welcome
much,
to Senate
Mr.
Corporation.
Chairman. Thank you. Thank you for allowing me to speak. I wanted to address a couple of things. One was that I have heard that legals
Can I have
is
you give us your name and what you do, Mr. Boren?
Oh, I'm sorry. Dale Boren. I'm publisher emeritus from the Casper Star Tribune. I published a weekly newspaper in Casper called the Casper Journal for years and have been involved with the Star Tribune for about 20 years now. Recently stepped away from daily management, but I'm still involved in the opinion pages in our literacy programs and special projects, and that's hence my title, emeritus. In listening to this conversation over many years, have heard that some in state government feel like that publishing legals in the newspapers is subsidizing the newspaper industry. And as Ms. Hicks said, we give a really fair value in the price to governments, but it's a fair transaction because what we give to what our product is we give it to people. So they don't have to go to a destination website to find out something. They'll find something that is of information that is interesting to them. In the case of employees of a government entity that are paid with public money, if that causes them to question their government, to ask questions, whether or not the question is positive or negative, if they're just asking questions, that's a positive thing. And it's the basis of good government. The other thing that we do as part of that is all of our pages end up in the archive, whether in Cheyenne at the State Archive or in the case of the Casper Star Tribune, we give our pages every day to the Western History Center, and they can search them by name or by subject. And so if you're looking at history, or if you want to know what has happened in our community, including with our governments for the past 129 years, that information is available, and that's part and parcel with the price of that. The last thing I would like to address, you had asked about circulation. And in the evolving industry that is the newspaper industry, circulation is an old term, because it used to be you could look at papers number of circulation. Like the Star Tribune, when I joined the Star Tribune, we reached 88,000 readers, which was a significant number of readers. And that was based on about 35,000 print copies. Today, the same number of readers by that equation that we would reach would be 15,000 readers. However, we have about an equal number of digital subscribers as we have print subscribers, and it's growing at 5 to 1. When we lose a print subscriber, we generally sell 5 digital subscriptions. So the bottom line is that the new equation is about readership, not circulation. So our readership with our 15,000 daily print readers and our nearly 6,500 digital subscribers, combined with the ways that we try to reach readers, which is Facebook and Twitter and email, newsletters and whatnot, drove 5.29 million, nearly 6 million page views in the last 30 days on trib.com, which is a significant, I mean, that is a truly significant number of readers. We're reaching people in ways that we didn't use to reach them when we had bigger circulation, if you will. And so the impact is still significant. A number of years ago, back when we used to do research on our readers and how they responded, and we did this to sell ads, honestly. We had some information we paid for. I'll tell you, we paid $60,000 for this 2-year study. And in this study, we found out that 35% of our newspaper subscribers looked at the inserts in the paper first. Now that probably warmed the heart of all of our advertisers, and it should have mine too. But as an opinion, as an editor and a publisher, I was like, well, we work so hard, they want to see those ads. Well, that same study also showed that nearly 20% of our readers looked at the legals and classifieds first before they read the headlines. That's what they were interested in. And I don't think that has changed. The model has changed how we deliver our information. It's changed dramatically, and it will continue to change. And as it does, as using the Star Tribune as an example, I can say that we are going to meet those changes. We are evolving. We will continue to evolve. But I think that the information, such as what we pay our public employees, that information is really pertinent to maintaining a well-educated and engaged citizenry. And I encourage you to not pass this bill. And thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks for the testimony. Senator Nethercott, I see a hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good to see you, Mr. Boren. So I've heard that the method of delivering the news is changing, and I believe that to be true based on the increase of digital technology. And so, and I believe it's important for newspapers to continue to provide this information to the public, whether they're reading it or not. But I think that that's important. And so I'm aware that the costs of printing are expensive, both for the newspaper and for the people who want to print. But as those behaviors change, and that is evidenced by the data, would it not be easier just to provide a link to the state website or the county website with that information where it's located? Or you just extrapolate that data yourself? I mean, I think that there are smarter ways to achieve the same result of transparency through the use of our local newspapers. But the challenge is in a budget crunch, what is happening is just an inability to, I think, think adaptively, as opposed to just kind of digging in from the newspaper's perspectives and providing solutions. And this is not unique to the newspapers as we deal with this across the board. I face similar challenges in the judicial system. But those are my thoughts of why not just a link to the same information. And I've heard the challenge presented, and I'm a bit dismayed by it, of the fox in the hen house, and certainly those concerns are valid, but that the data is going to be manipulated. You know, I'm not aware of the newspapers having the capacity to validate the veracity of the public record that they've obtained. They're just printing what is being provided. And so I think that allegation is without merit when it comes to the newspaper's, investigation into the quality of the public record produced as a result of that response. So any feedback on that?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Nethercott, nice to see you too. I think that oftentimes that the organizations that print their legals in the newspaper, the first thing in their next meeting, they say, this record was printed in the Casper Star Tribune. Any changes? And they approve that publication. And so we can have great confidence as citizens that is actually the record. The changes, providing a link to some data is clearly a possibility, but the way that I think that makes that information a destination rather than having it be presented. And will that change? We both know that it will, but today I think that information is best served being in print and being archived and being solidified, if you will, as information that can't be changed as we move forward.
Further questions? Thank you. I'm one of your digital subscribers. It's good. Senator Boner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No questions necessarily, but I just wanted to let everybody know that I'm unfortunately going to have to drop off. I have an important meeting dealing with how we're going to be dealing with some of the recent federal actions here. I'm just going to have to drop off, but just we're talking about transparency, I just want to let everybody know that I'm leaning towards a no vote on this bill, given the relative impacts it has on our municipalities and counties. At least it looks like it's, I think the word of the day is de minimis. And the data I have is nothing's more than 0.5% of the municipalities or counties budget. And I guess no offense to anybody from the Casper Star, but I'm more concerned about, the smaller newspapers like the Buffalo Bulletin that we just heard from. It's really important to have those entities be very strong in our local communities, and as we struggle with misinformation at all levels of civic engagement, I think it's really important we keep those local entities strong. So just thought I'd share that with the committee before I drop off, and don't know how you want to handle any sort of proxy vote, Mr. Chairman, but certainly want to make everybody aware of that.
Senator Boner, if you would like to text me a proxy vote, I will accept it. We'll expect published report of your meetings in the local paper. Thank you.
Maybe not this one, Mr.
Scott.
Chairman.
Senator Scott.
Mr. Chairman, with regard to some of the testimony we just got from Mr. Boren, I had an experience myself during this last campaign that I think shows the extent to which the newspaper is in fact read and used as a source of information. And forgive me, Mr. Chairman, for giving a personal example, but through various errors, they managed to leave out my response to their campaign edition for the primary that people actually used to make their decisions. And when I compared the vote I got in the absentee to what I got in the general election, it looked like the Star Tribune was making about a 6% difference in terms of if you weren't there, you just got ignored. So I do think that shows that this is still a very relevant medium for getting information out to people. As I say, I've seen it personally.
Perfect. Further questions? Thank you. Great testimony.
Mr. Chairman,
Edelman,
thank you. May I also add that I have no argument with Senator Boner's contention that the small newspapers are vital to our communities around the state. Absolutely agree. Thank you, sir.
Thanks for your testimony. Mr. Edelman, you've been very patient. If you want to unmute and come on.
Thank you.
Welcome.
I appreciate it. Thank you, Chairman Driscoll and committee. I'm from Douglas, Wyoming. My name is Matt Edelman. I'm publisher of the Douglas Budget and the Glen Rock Independent, and I've heard quite a bit of comments about Converse County, and so I'm very interested in some of the comments there. And I wanted to share a couple things with you, and I really have 4 points. One is a story that happened last Friday, because we're talking about small of the small papers, and they're going to be the most impacted by this. We run the Glen Rock Independent, which has, since the day we bought it in 2006, I believe, struggled. And we bought it in order to keep it alive, not because we needed it. I didn't need another headache in my life. And, but it was probably on the chopping block then, struggling to stay alive. We really wanted to keep it. We also bought the High Plains Sentinel in Wright, Wyoming for the same reason. We wanted to keep it alive because we believe in community newspapers. So, but speaking of Glen Rock, even when between the pandemic and the economy, it looked like the Glen Rock Independent was just going to have to close. And things were not looking good this last year. We decided to merge the Independent into the Douglas Budget and just close it. The town of Glen Rock, which had repeatedly said, we really need to stop running legals. It's too costly. Public notices are costing us too much. Said, what do you mean you're going to close it? And we said, well, you don't want to run public notices. It's about the only thing that's making any money over there. And because the economy at the same time with the energy industry going down has hit everybody else, hit everything. The town of Glen Rock voted unanimously, despite our news coverage that was not very positive in their viewpoint, to run public notices, continue running them, even if we didn't run a separate paper over there, and continue running them in the Douglas Budget during that time frame, because they believed that information was critical in getting out to the public. That move, coupled with the Converse County commissioners doing the same thing, caused us to rethink it. We had conversations with both entities and kept the Glen Rock Independent alive, and it's still in business today because of that. Because of that, last Friday, we got a call from a lady who said she doesn't subscribe to paper, but was told by two friends who do subscribe that her name was in the public notices and that she needed to read them, that she needed to know how to get hold of that information. And she couldn't find it online at the county government. She couldn't find it on at the city government. She didn't know why her name was in the public notices. So we set her up with a free subscription. She went in, she looked, she found what she needed, and she used, and I'm not even actually sure what it was she needed, but it was something to do on a civil matter, and found what she needed. Her point was the newspaper was the one stop she knew to call to find public information on a public notice. She couldn't get it on a county website. She couldn't get it on a town website. She didn't want to go to the school website. She would have had to go to multiple websites. And she was thrilled to be able to find what she needed quickly and easily on our website. She would never even known to look if it hadn't been printed in the paper. On top of that, if you take away that revenue source, papers the size of the Glen Arc Independent, and I'm only going to speak for that one because I'm not going to talk about others that size, that's their lifeblood, especially in times of pandemics, in times of economic downturns, as Converse County lives and breathes on oil, gas, and coal. And as you know, that is very volatile, as you're dealing with it right now as well. So there's times that's the only source that's keeping alive for a couple months at a time. You will be losing some newspapers if you pass this bill. It's going to hurt an industry, and it's not much money. I went through every town government here in every county, and the most it was in any given year was 0.5% of their budget. The reality is it was more like 0.25% in most years. The 0.5%, it was a county during an election year when they had a lot of tax notices. And the counties would actually be less, but they chose to run in both newspapers. And they only have to run in one under the law. They're choosing to do both. So they see the value. They know there's a value. They wanted that information in both papers. I understand this bill allows them to continue doing that if they choose to, but it allows them not to. And a different county commission would probably say, let's save some money and cost a community its newspaper. So secondly, on costs, it's an interesting fact, I guess, that Converse County, for instance, spent at the high end $32,000 on all of its advertising, not just public notices last year. And that's with 2 newspapers. That included all voluntary advertising, which included full page ads, COVID related ads, health ads. And that was, at that time, that was one of the higher numbers that they'd spend. And that was probably less than 0.5% of their entire budget. On public notices, it was well under $20,000. Their open gov spending, as was noted, is around $40,000 a year. That's on their financial side. That doesn't address the rest of it. When they go to put all the rest of their IT and security costs into that, and they do put a lot of things up, and I want to give them a lot of credit. The county puts everything they can possibly put up on their website, but it's way more than just open gov. They put minutes, they put salaries, they put financials, they put everything, and it's awesome. And we direct a lot of people to that site. But the interesting thing is we still get a lot more people going to our public notices online, and then we direct them to the county site if they want more information. And we get far more still coming to our site looking for that. And that's really all I wanted to say, is that once you put it in a newspaper, you're also getting it online. You're also getting partnerships with the county and the cities in terms of that. And that public access, that public information is what's key in most of the bigger places. Douglas, you pull public notices from the Douglas budget, you're not going to kill the paper. Same as the Buffalo Bulletin. But in small communities, you probably are going to have a significant impact. Thank you for your time.
Questions from Mr. Edelman? Thank you. I've enjoyed the Douglas budget for many years, back to years
Thank
when
you.
I represented down that country. It's a good paper. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate your testimony. Next, we'll call on Mr. Moberg, which happens to be my hometown papers, runs all of them and runs a great publication, and has been a great friend to the people in our county. Welcome, Mr. Moberg.
Thank you, Senator Driscoll. Chairman, members of the committee, I appreciate the opportunity to throw in my 2 cents as well here. I'm not going to belabor any points that have already been made, and so I'll be fairly brief. But one anecdote that I did want to kind of throw out there, and I think Senator Scott maybe stole my thunder a little bit, and I apologize, Senator Driscoll, I'm going to take a little liberty here, but when the good senator announces that he's going to run his next campaign, and which we certainly hope he will, we're going to be one of his first stops along the route. He's going to come in and we're going to put together his announcement and tout his accomplishments, and that's where he's going to ask the voters for their vote, and that's because he knows, as we all do, that in these towns like Sundance, Wyoming, that's where that's noticed. It's noticed in the newspaper. He could simply create his website and put his announcement up there, wait for folks to come along and find it. But obviously that's not the way to campaign. That's not the way things work. And that's kind of what we're asking to do with these notices too. If you don't want them noticed, putting them on websites is a great idea. Taking them out of the newspapers, putting them on those sites, particularly in towns like ours. Great plan. That'll work perfectly well. If you want them noticed, they need to be in the newspapers. I think to make that argument and then provide a statement that may be dubious in the amount of money that's going to be saved in that is going to be a long reach. And I think it'll serve to make the folks in our community, our elected officials, it's going to serve to make their jobs that much more difficult. As it stands now, they stand on the idea that they're transparent. The minutes are noticed, they're recognizable, they're right there all the time. Their jobs are made easier because of that. We make that more difficult if we take a different tack, try to make those notices a little bit more difficult to get to, even inadvertently. It's going to make their lives a lot more difficult as well. As a small businessman here in Sundance, I can tell you it's going to have a dramatic effect on our business. We publish the Sundance newspaper, the Moorcroft newspaper, and the Hewlett newspaper. And again, similar to Mr. Edelman's comments, it won't kill off the Sundance paper, but it's going to leave a heck of a mark with the other two. And it's going to take people off the main street in Sundance, Wyoming. I'll promise you that. And it's probably going to move them into a government position somewhere instead, I suppose. I don't know, but maybe that's what we're after. So that's all I got. I appreciate the opportunity to comment. If anybody's got any questions, I'd be happy to do my best. So.
Questions for Mr. Moberg? Senator Nethercott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Because I can't help myself here. Mr. Moberg, do you think that there should be a law requiring that meeting minutes should be read on the local radio station? I know the local radio stations struggle too, and they provide a service of information to our community members who may not be able to purchase or have a subscription to newspapers or may not be comfortable with literacy. Do you think that we should require notices to be read and governments to pay for advertising space with our local radio stations?
Senator Nethercott, Chairman Driscoll, no, I don't. I think that's a little bit of an apples and oranges discussion. I think those are two entirely different means of transmission. I think that's not an appropriate method for getting that information across. I think it's just quite simply not efficient. So.
Thank you, Mr. Moberg. Further questions for Mr. Moberg? Thank you very much. I'm not sure if Mr. Merrill is part of the group that's going to come at the end. If he is, I think we're to the point to ask the Jonathan Downing and whoever the group is to come on, and if not, let's go to Mr. Merrill. Looks like you are together. So I'd ask each of you to identify yourselves individually, and then whoever wants to lead off. Please, welcome to Senate Corporations.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't know who you want to go first.
Go ahead and lead off, Mr. Merrill. I know part of you, not all of you, and let's go ahead and pick off, and I'll just let each one of you, you can raise your hand or do whatever. We'll walk through each one of you. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Chris Merrill. I'm the Executive Director of the Equality State Policy Center. And I'm here today to speak in opposition to this bill. As you know, government transparency is central to my organization's mission, and it's also near and dear to my heart. And you've heard from several others, and you'll hear from others after me. So I'll try not to duplicate what's been said. And as I listened to this testimony and the debate on this bill throughout the interim, I was trying to figure out what exactly it is about this bill that seems off key. And I think it's a really simple, basic concept. This bill, as drafted, abandons a great tradition that we've had for a long time in this country and in this state, while shifting the burden from the government to the people. So the existing law requires local governments to publish this information in the local paper. And I know this might sound quaint and old-timey to folks, but I think this requirement has been a great benefit to the public, and it's been underpinned by a sound philosophy and tradition of open government. And I hope we don't underestimate today the clear and powerful message this law has sent. We've said to local governments, it's incumbent on you to inform the people. This is one of your essential duties. And to me, this is the right message. It's the right approach. And just as it was last year, last decade, the decades before that, it's well worth the cost. It has a price tag, yes, but it's money well spent, and it's in line with our values. But it seems to me that the implicit message in the bill before you today as drafted is different. It's saying, people, it's now incumbent on you to remember to get on a computer and regularly monitor the websites of your municipalities and counties. And Mr. Chairman, I believe the existing law is better, even with the current technology available, because it doesn't ask regular people to be journalists, and it doesn't require them to figure out how and where to find this important information, which as websites change, will likely change over time. I believe the existing law is better because it delivers this information to the public in the way they're used to getting it, in the local paper, where it's been for a long time, with the rest of the local news. And just a quick final point, Mr. Chairman, this conversation we're having today is intertwined with what I think is a quintessentially American concept of the newspaper of record. And I might be a little romantic about that, but not only does this concept serve the people of today, it's also a gift to future generations and future historians. The paper of record functions as an amazing historical archive, and I'd hate to give up on that. So when you move this information from the paper onto our local government websites which can sometimes be wonky. Some are better than others. I also have concerns about the integrity and the continuity of the historical record and the accessibility of the historical archive to the public. So, Mr. Chairman, I'd urge you to vote against this bill and uphold what I think is a great tradition of open government, keeping the burden on the government to inform the public and the historical record. Thank you for considering my testimony, and I'm happy to try to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Merrill. Questions for Mr. Merrill? Senator Nethercott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Merrill. And to the members of the public, have no fear. I think this bill will die a quick and rapid death. But I do want to communicate to the public, to the newspapers, we have to do things differently. And I am asking you to come forward with solutions for how to reduce these costs to our government entities while still maintaining transparency. Simply sticking the feet in the ground and drawing a line in the sand and saying, no, 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 the fox is in the hen house, mischief is underway, is just not a solution. So the bill will die. We'll continue to do things the way that we always will, regardless of changing technologies and changing availability of providing information and for considerably less money. One. Two, there is technology out there that locks and archives websites, each page by page by page. So I just want everyone to be aware of that. When they're producing their own websites and putting material out there, you can just Google that or use whatever search engine you choose, and you can find all of the different sites available with archived website data to preserve all of that information for as long as our heart's content, which I think might be far safer than the basement of a newspaper in a downtown that is likely to catch fire. So, just things to consider as we move forward in the future and continue to discuss this for years to come.
Thank you. Further questions, committee? Thank you. Ms. Holland, would you like to go next?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, welcome to Senate Ag. We hear you good. Senate Corporations, I'm going to get beat to death by my committee. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Darcy Hoffland, and I am the Executive Director of the Wyoming Press Association. On behalf of all newspapers of general circulation in every county in our state, we strongly oppose this bill. We believe that requiring publication of notices in an independent third-party newspaper with a financial and civic interest is the best method for ensuring that the public receives notice. We think that allowing for government-only posting of this information takes away public notice, and it removes that independent proof of publication. And because newspapers are archived in many ways, we create the ability for private parties and governmental entities to prove statutory notice was given and given properly. And I don't want to be redundant. We've heard a lot of testimony already from newspapers, but I did want to point out specifically to Dale Bourne's comment, newspapers do publish public notices on their websites, and their websites attract significantly more eyeballs than the sites operated by state and local governments. Publishing notices that people actually read entails substantial costs. We expend a lot of resources on our website security and data backup, and also on marketing to promote readership. The public is accustomed to finding notices in their newspaper websites, as Mr. Edelman testified to. And like he said, there's this serendipitous discovery process with notices in the paper product and on our website. One reader sees it, they might tell their neighbor who doesn't read it. So we think that we've done this job ably for a very long time. We've been good stewards of public notices. We do provide for that independent third party verification. I think it was Ronald Reagan that said trust but verify. So that really concludes my comments, and I'll stand for any questions.
Any questions? Any questions? Thank you. I had someone with a hand up here. I do not see him. Oh, we do. Mr. Wood, welcome. I have a father-in-law that's Mr. Wood. You look a little different. Well, welcome to Corporations.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm sure your father-in-law is a wonderful gentleman. So
you're correct.
thank you again. My name is Jim Wood, and I'm a publisher with Wyoming Newspapers Incorporated. The company I work for publishes newspapers in Torrington, Wheatland, Lingle, Guernsey, Lusk. We publish a weekly newspaper for the military in Cheyenne called the Cheyenne Minuteman. We also publish on the western side of the state, Evanston, Bridger Valley, Cameroon, and Pinedale newspapers. So we have some of those small newspapers that have been referenced here. And yes, the impact on the Lingle and Guernsey type newspapers will be substantial if this happens. So what I would like to speak to somewhat also is the difference between publishing, providing notification, and posting. I liken it to if you're going to have a party and you print out an invitation on your home computer and you tape it up on your back door. That's similar to what would go on with notification, publishing, posting just on governmental type websites. It's going to be there, but are people going to find it? The difference is if you're going to have that party and you run that ad in the local newspaper, people are going to see it. They're going to talk about it. That's providing notification. They're going to tell their friends. They're going to read it in the printed product. They may read it online on the e-edition of the newspaper if they subscribe that way. It may get picked up and posted by somebody on social media. And so the word gets spread around. You're going to have many more people at your party if you do it that way rather than post it on your back door. So there is a big difference between providing notification, that's transparency, and just providing it out there for somebody to stumble upon, or those with a particular interest going to find it. I find it interesting that Mr. Ryman earlier talked about on, being able to go find the salaries. If you dig a little bit, he said, you can find them on the website for the school districts. It's also interesting, Senator Scott mentioned earlier that it seems that the salaries of school district administrators seem to be going up, and they are the entity that has less requirement for providing notification in newspapers. I would also argue that the savings, I know you guys are looking to save money, everybody in the state is, and I think the savings can come from members in the community who see something posted in the newspaper, published in the newspaper, the legal notices, and they have ideas that they can pass on to their city council members, their county commissioners, and others, ways that can save more money than you're going to save with 0.5% of the budget if you cut legal notice publication out of newspapers. That's all I have at this point in time. I'd answer questions.
Questions for Mr. Wood? Questions for Mr. Wood? Thank you. Quite the collection you've put together. Congratulations.
Thank you, Senator Driscoll, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Downing, I think you're batting the tail end.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, and in particular, thank you for taking the time today to spend a great deal of time listening and hearing some of the stories from around the state, both anecdotally and very specific. I'm not going to repeat all the testimony you've heard earlier. I would emphasize that we'd had this during some of these discussions, the presupposition that getting rid of this, and by moving it more into the public sector from the private sector, that there would be cost savings there. And as we move forward, I think we need to dig a little bit deeper on that. Having those pieces outsourced to the private sector that have that infrastructure in place already, I think you might see that you've got more efficiencies there than you realize, not only from wanting to increase access, but also from the cost savings. And so the last piece I would just close with is that appreciate Senator Nethercott's comments on the challenges that we have as far as looking forward with the budget challenges that are very significant and very tough decisions for you all moving forward. And appreciated the comments from the previous county clerks as far as having that working group together. I'm confident without visiting with the association, but knowing how they operate and how they look to try and find solutions, that we ought to have a discussion. I don't think it necessarily requires legislation, but have a discussion among those stakeholders to see if there are some ways to improve efficiencies or to increase that. Because at the end of the day, and even with this process right now, increasing access as well as being able to have public participation in the process has been one of the good things that's come out of the last year. And just appreciate all of your hard work on this. We're all in this together, and we'll work together to try and find some additional solutions.
Thank you. Questions, Mr. Downing? Questions for Mr. Downing? Thank you. We have other people, but I think they're for the next bill. If anyone's here on this bill, if they'd raise their hand, we'll let them in. And if not, we'll move into Ms. Fritz, welcome. Good to see your face this morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and committee members. The only thing that I wanted to mention in regards to the publishing is I think there's a large variance between the...
You're pretty quiet. We can hardly hear you.
Oh, sorry. Let's see if I can turn my mic up.
I see Senator Scott looking in his ears, so thank you.
Okay. There's a large difference between the per column inch charged by different papers. So I think that would make a big difference if there was a cap on it, or it was regulated in some way so that one monopoly could not charge twice as much as another newspaper does. In Crook County, we're fortunate because they charge us a very good rate, but that's not the same everywhere, I don't think.
Thank you. I never got you to properly introduce yourself. I kind of...
Oh, I'm sorry. Linda Fritz, Crook County Clerk.
Thank you. Questions for Ms. Fritz? Thank you. Appreciate the testimony. Mr. Frazier, welcome to Senate Corporations.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I assume you can hear me okay.
Yes, sir.
Appreciate your time today, and I appreciate your willingness to discuss this difficult subject. I want to begin my testimony by reiterating that we here at WHAM are big proponents of transparency, and we actively promote that in our training with our elected officials, and we also are strongly in favor of freedom of the press, and we support that avidly, including with our pocketbook, with our annual dues to the Wyoming Press Association. I want to reference Mr. Rieman's testimony. I don't intend to repeat any of it, but I want to tell you that we support everything he said, and he said it long enough ago that I hope you can still remember his testimony. But let me also indicate that of course, I'm an avid reader of newspapers around the state, including from my hometown. You've heard this morning from the publisher of my hometown paper, who's an old friend, and there's no part of me that wants to hurt him or his colleagues, for that matter. However, there's, I think, some important things that we need to address here. By having this discussion, as has been alluded to, you're really looking at modernizing a statute that, as I pointed out in the interim committee, not only predated the internet, but I believe also predated the radio and the television. And at the time that this was put into place, that was really, other than word of mouth, the only way that the government could communicate with the citizens. And So, so it has served us well. I think it's appropriate to do some modernizing. One thing that I want to really clarify is that we keep throwing around the word public notices, that we're doing away with public notices, and that's a stretch. This bill here only deals with two things: the publication of minutes and the publication of salaries. I would point out that on the minutes, of course, not only are minutes available on the website in addition to what we publish in the papers, but we actually, in many cases, actually live stream the meetings and put them up on our website so that those that can't watch them live can watch them at their convenience. In addition, I appreciate that at most of the meetings, the local paper not only publishes the minutes, but usually a story about the meeting, which paints a better picture really than the minutes, which really kind of only show typically what actions were taken and what the final action is. So again, we're not talking about doing away with public notices. There is significant value there, and we agree with that. We're really just talking about these two areas where we're having those things available on the city's website 24/7, instead of the salaries being published annually in the paper. They're available on the city website anytime somebody wants to go to those. So again, thank you for letting me clarify that. Also, another thing I want to clarify about the language of the bill is that it was mentioned that some of the small towns may not have a website and the capability to put that on there. Under current statute, a city that doesn't have a newspaper published in its jurisdiction is required to post those minutes for 10 days and at the city clerk's office or at such other place as deemed by the governing body. The new language in this bill similarly says that if the city or town doesn't have a website, they will post, and it's the same language at the clerk's office and in other areas wherever deemed necessary. I don't know this for sure, but I'd be really surprised if there's any city so small that it doesn't have a website and yet has a newspaper published in its jurisdiction. So I'm not sure that really changes anything. And I also want to point out that, and again, we appreciate the transparency the newspapers provide. I believe under this bill, we'll still be providing those documents to the newspaper, and it'll certainly be up to them if they desire to publish it. And certainly I would hope they would. And with that, I guess I would just indicate, and again, I feel a little uncomfortable about this because, again, I support and appreciate our local papers, but I find a couple of things about the arguments that have been made to be a little bit curious. One being that that as has been testified in this hearing, as newspapers are increasingly going to web-based publishing and their readership is increasingly on the web, that the argument would be that it's not okay to put this on a website. So I find that a little curious. I also, in the interim committee, there was a lot of discussion and even some disagreement about the numbers in terms of what cities, towns, counties are paying for these particular two publications. And as I, between then and now, as I kind of riddled through that and tried to really get my finger on, exactly what that was and which of us was closer to the accurate information there, I kind of determined in my own mind that it was somewhat irrelevant. That what I was asking myself is, okay, so what level of inefficient spending of the taxpayer's dollar is appropriate? And I think the answer to that would be zero. If we're talking about any money and it's not being spent in the most efficient way with our taxpayer dollars, I think all of us would agree there's not a certain number that's all right. So Again, I kind of find those couple of, those are kind of some of my observations. Again, I do support the newspapers. I know it's getting harder to make a living in written journalism. I don't, you know, if the legislature finds that, you know, that it's enough value to have these and enough danger of them going out of business that we need to provide a subsidy, even if it's determined that that should come through local governments, there certainly should be some opportunity for the local government to spend that in the most efficient manner. And again, I think this bill not only takes steps to modernize, you know, the way we communicate with the people and actually reflect more closely how we actually do communicate these days. But I also think it's narrowly focused enough to really kind of target an area that really could be argued to be more transparent when published 24/7 on the city's website. I thank you for your time. I again, you know, I appreciate your time. I appreciate everything that's been said here today, and I certainly don't want to look like I'm coming off as anti-press, because that the opposite is entirely true. So I appreciate your time, and I would certainly stand for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Frazier. Welcome back, Senator Boner and Senator Scott. Got your hand up.
Mr. Chairman, for Mr. Frazier, the counties gave us a figure of a savings of 400,000, and I understood it to be per year. If this bill passes, what's the comparable figure for the municipalities? Do you have that?
Thank you, Senator. Mr. Chairman, through the chair. I don't have that figure with me right now for all 99 municipalities. And as I said, we did do some of that gathering. I'm sure it far exceeds, you know, one of our mid-sized cities reported that they spent between 30 and 40,000 a year. So, you know, you extrapolate that and you're not talking about insignificant dollars, but I don't have that total dollar figure for you, Mr. Senator Scott.
Thank you. Any further questions for Mr. Frazier? Thank you, Mr. Frazier.
Thank you.
Do we have anyone else in the waiting room? Don't believe we do. Public testimony is closed. Committee, what's your pleasure? Senator Case moved the bill. We're up. Discussion on the bill. Senator Scott.
Mr. Chairman, I find myself really torn on this bill. We are going to save significant money. I would suspect the city figure is going to be similar to the one we got from the counties. We're in times where we're hurting and going to be hurting for a while, given the extent that the federal government seems to be poised to wage war, economic war on our economy. So we're going to be hurting for a while. I find that going to a website is much more difficult. At least my experience with government websites is I have trouble navigating them. And most of mine's been with the Secretary of State's, and I find trouble with that one. I'm sure there are experts out there who can, but a lot of us have trouble with it. So I think we're losing something very real, because I think the paper is read and the information is getting out to the general public that way, and we're hearing about it. So love to keep it, love to find a way to compromise this. And in some of the other attempts, like we did in insurance, we were able to find a compromise that worked very well for everybody, but I haven't found one in this one. Maybe somebody else can eventually, but I can't. So, Mr. Chairman, I do think we're under tremendous financial pressure. So I'm probably going to vote for the bill, but I really am torn on this one. And if somebody can find a good compromise, I'm all for it.
Thank you. Further testimony? Senator Nethercott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know Senator Boner is ready to vote and finds the issue belabored, but nonetheless, I stand by my comments I said before that the bill will fail, whether in this committee or in the Senate. And that's as a result, I think, of a lack of adaptability in light of changing times, motivated and exacerbated by budget declines. So I just, and I share the concerns of WHAM, and I hesitate as well. I support our local newspapers. I value them. I've worked for them, but there is some hypocrisy there. When asked how much of your percentage of your budget do these public notices make, and they think that they're answering the question of, you rely on these for your livelihood, right? And their answer always is no, it's less than 10% of our budgets. But then in the same breath, they say the newspaper is going to die. Our downtown businesses are going to close as a result of the failure to publish local county salaries in their newspaper or meeting minutes. And so I think, and I would ask, as this conversation again continues, that the Press Association and our newspapers across the state, which we value and we care about and we want to see thrive, really have a hard conversation about how we are supposed to cut these budgets and give flexibility to our local government entities to make their own decisions for their own constituents about the use of their funds. So, I think this bill should move forward, but I know it's just a wasted effort. So the conversation continues.
Thank you. Further comments, committee? I'm much the same. I think we're all torn. This is really a difficult issue. For me, yes vote to put it on the floor. I think it's worthy of getting out to a broader audience or to look at some possible solutions to it and where we head at. They really do. We're at a time that transparency is paramount to this body and to the public. And it's really hard to get it out there correctly. And I think particularly Senator Nethercott's are directly to the point. We're into new times and we're really not trying hard enough to find our way into the new times. So for me, I will be a tentative yes vote and likely a no vote on the main body when it comes. Any further comments? Question being called. Roll call, please.
Senator Boner,
No.
Senator Case,
Aye.
Senator Nethercott,
Aye.
Senator Scott,
Aye.
Chairman Driscoll.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, you have 4 ayes and 1 no.
Thank you, committee. If there's any further comments, we're not going to take another bill up. We're down to 13 minutes, and I happen to know we have dozens to testify on the next bill. So with that, concludes Senate corporations until the springtime season. So thank you all for your